And the next day, wild horses come and they're like, oh, that's great. And he's like, well, maybe. And then his son gets on the horse, falls off, breaks his leg, and he's like, well, maybe. But that whole saying of like, you really don't know, and things that happen, people are so quick to react that just wait, let the smoke clear. It may not be as bad as you think, or you could turn it into a positive for sure.
Welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. Today, we are going to talk about one of my favorite things. Number one is mindset, but number two is real estate. And these are two things I think are so critically important. One, mindset helps us succeed in any aspect of life, fitness, family, relationships, business, just life in general. I think it's so critically important to do that. And Matin, today, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've gone through so many different things. When we first started talking about your first introduction and foray into real estate, it didn't come easy at the beginning. It wasn't like you were given that sort of golden goose starting point. Mom and dad gave you that big, $1 billion bank account to go spend. That's not what happened. What you were given was adversity. What you were given was challenges, and then you overcame those. So Matt, thanks so much for coming to the show and really sharing that with the people that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Steve. Yeah, for sure.
So let's first go back to those moments in the beginnings, the early beginnings, before you got into, I mean, you're ranked, what is it, top 1% or something in Philly as real estate agents. You're ranked in different counties. Like, let's go through the accolades first so we know who we're talking about, because I think you've got so many different things. You've got a brokerage with a lot of people. You've got a mortgage business that you're partnership with. You've got lots of real estate that you own right now. So you've done all these things to become super successful right now, but it wasn't always that way at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. So, so right now we own a real estate brokerage. I've been in the business 20 years. I got my real estate license when I was 18. I own a ton of real estate. That's my passion, owning and, residential property, commercial property, all of the above. Love owning land. I also have a large property management business, construction development. We have a mortgage company. So all of the above, anything real estate, we're heavily involved. Like you said, we're ranked in the top 1% in our area, but overall in MLS, we're actually ranked in the top 5%. I also have gotten various awards, Drexel University 40 under 40, top business leader awards from multiple local counties, Philadelphia Magazine top agent accolades, so all kinds of stuff. But yeah, we're very blessed. We work very hard, so we're happy to be here. And like you said, it wasn't easy at first. We started off very modest means, me and my family. I lived in a small apartment most of my life. So it wasn't easy. Definitely a lot of adversity there. But I think one of the most important things that kind of got me through it and really had my mindset shaped at a young age was, when you're kind of poor and can't afford a lot of things, your number one priority becomes, how do I not be poor anymore? And number two is, we didn't own a house, we didn't own land or anything like that. So I always had this chip on my shoulder that I wanted to own my own properties, own land, own real estate. So luckily, at a very young age, I knew exactly kind of what I wanted to do and had that target. And I think that's a problem a lot of people have right now is, they go to school undecided and they're not sure what they want to do with their life, this, that, the other. That mindset comes from easy life. And I think kind of being a little living out of necessity or not out of necessity. So I think that mindset really helped me. But, I can go on and on about our journey there.
Well,
After.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think you really has motivated you was doing hard things. And, whether it's physically going to the gym or, jumping into business opportunities that, on the outset look massive. I mean, you're constantly quoting Bruce Lee and saying, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And certainly in the way that you've approached things, that's been a mantra. If we go back to the beginning and we kind of say, you're at that moment, things are tough, you're not well off, you don't have anything to rely on, it's hand to mouth. What was the moment that kind of helped you get from that to getting into action, not necessarily where you are today, but just getting into action? Because I think that right there is probably one of the hardest things for people to breach, is going from inaction to being in action.
Sure. So I think one of the most important things in life is confidence, and it doesn't come easy. It gets built over time. And I forget where I read this or heard it on a podcast, but I like the description of confidence is when you fulfill promises to yourself. So if you say, "Hey, I'm going to read one book this week," you actually do it. You get a little confidence that way. If you say, "Hey, I'm going to go to the gym every day this week," if you do it, you get more confidence. If you say, "Hey, look, I'm going to work X amount of hours this week," if you do it, you get more confidence. So I think that is the building blocks of confidence in yourself, because I think confidence, you also can't lie to yourself and say and fake it and say you have it. You really actually have to have it and believe in yourself. And that really helped me throughout my life, slowly fulfilling promises to myself, like, hey, getting in shape, working X amount of hours, reading a certain amount of studying a certain amount, whatever, fulfilling those promises kept giving me confidence. And then it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you have that confidence, you pursue things that might look dangerous on the outside or risky. You take a chance on yourself. You believe in yourself to take those leaps of faith.
Yeah, confidence is so important, and I think you're absolutely right. I think confidence comes from wins, and I think the importance that comes out of this for the audience, for everybody who's listening, is you got to focus on those wins, no matter how small they are, that happen in your life, because those wins are building blocks for your mental fortitude. I call it your willpower that satisfies your discipline. Because if you don't have those small wins, no matter how disciplined you are, that discipline is going to start to wane. So if you can start pegging those moments in life and saying, no, no, I'm going to celebrate every success, no matter if it's just I did one phone call today and that's my success, or whether I closed $100 million deal, each of those is a moment to move forward. And so celebrating those success is extremely important. Now, I'm a big UFC guy, and I love a good physical confrontation, because I think fighting is inevitable. It's part of our DNA. And whether we fight metaphysically, whether we fight physically, whether we fight with words or weapons, there's always a fight that happens in anything. It could be external, or that fight could be internal. When we look at a moment in your life where you were in a fight on something, and you could get back to that moment where you were there, the moment where you could have quit, but you didn't. What did that moment look like, and how did you overcome that moment?
Yeah, and just like you, I like combat sports too. And unfortunately, when I was younger, I got into a couple brawls. But yeah, I would say something that comes to mind was the financial crisis. So I got my license in 2004. GFC was 6, 7, 8, and it was and what happened was I was a very, very successful person at a very young age. When I was 21, I was already a multimillionaire. Had over 20 properties. I was very successful, and I had this said falsely that anything I touch turns to gold. I'm unstoppable. That whole thing. And I was very humbled through the financial crisis and learned a lot of lessons there. Where I lost some properties. I had no business in the restaurant business, but I opened a restaurant because I thought everything I could do turned to gold at, 20, 21 years old. Opened a restaurant, did all these things, and restaurant went belly up. It was kind of a disaster for a couple years. And, it was especially dark because I worked, from nothing, coming from nothing, worked my butt off to get to that point. And I thought I made it. I was done, super successful. And I was young, 21 years old, and then to see all that come crashing down was a very tough pill to swallow and very difficult. But over the years, it actually ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. And kind of turned into a positive. But that was definitely a challenging time, and I had dark thoughts, so not a good time.
And as you're going through those dark thoughts, and as you said, it was a TSN point to get into something bigger, because I think a lot of times when adversity hits us, we're looking at the adversity itself, not what can the adversity teach us and help us to become greater. Because if we can handle great adversities, then those adversities have become, overcome. Now we can handle sometimes even bigger ones if we take it in the right stride. And so what helped you get over that moment? Was it urgency? Was it like what gave you that resilience to be able to beat that?
Sure. So it was, like I said, extremely challenging and extremely difficult. And I think going back to that confidence of like, hey, I came from nothing. I did it before. I can do it again. And starting to believing in myself again. And I had a lot of self-doubts, lack of confidence at that time. It was very challenging. So kind of rebuilding that confidence definitely helped. And I'd love to tell a quick story of something that happened at that time where, just an example of how it turned into something positive. I had multiple properties where and I was getting back then no doc loans, all kinds of, duct tape and deals and all that kind of stuff. And I had some big banks that aren't even around anymore, like New Century and GMAC, a couple of those that I got lending through, come to me, call me and say, this is when the world was crashing. They came to me and said, "Hey, look, you got loans basically that you weren't supposed to get. We're demanding these be paid full and due. We're ballooning the payment." And I was gonna have a heart attack. I was so stressed, and I was like shopping around trying to get financing, pull every dollar change I had out the drawer to pay it off, whatever I could do. But I didn't end up being able to do it. So they called, they reached out to me again. I said, "Hey, like, there's nothing I can do. Do your worst. Like, I just can't do it because it's not available." And what ended up happening was they went belly up, and I got all those deals, all those loans modified, where before my rates were like 9 to 12%, and the rent was basically paying the mortgage. They all dropped to like 2, 3%. So it was amazing, and it was like one of the best thing that ever happened. But I was stressed to the gills right before that. So I think just believing in yourself, and I love the saying that it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. It's so important and so true that I've seen all throughout my life where back in that time, I was like, the world's over, my life's over, it's over. But that wasn't the case at all. And that kind of stuff has happened to me many times in my life.
Yeah.
And it's never as good as it seems also where, hey, that's how I got in that mess, maybe overconfidence, that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I think Gary Keller said, life it's not that life is fair, it's not that life is unfair. Life just is. And I think that is something that I think if everybody could really dive into that, into whatever you're doing, if it's again fitness, relationships, or anything, there's travesty that's going to happen and there's opportunity that's going to happen. And it's your response to that is the one thing that you can control when you're looking at any adversity that comes into your life. I mean, you look at somebody like Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan, he didn't even make his varsity team in high school,
Mhm.
but he became the greatest of all time. Was there another moment that you could look back and say, here's a moment where again you ran into that adversity at the time with all the deals coming due? Another moment where you're building out a team because I know you have the brokerage, everything feels like it's going awesome, and then all of a sudden it's like another bump.
Yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about those moments. But one another moment that just pops in my head is, it wasn't so much of a loss, but just a challenging time was right at the beginning of COVID. A lot of our, like, right when it started, a lot of, when they had quarantines and all that, a lot of our agents started freaking out, and they're like not sure what's going to happen, this, that, the other. And I told them, "Hey, look, just wait and see, just wait and see." And we don't know what's going to happen yet. And that ended up being the biggest point of time that we've ever had in our business for a few years then. And at that point, my wife just had gotten pregnant, and she was basically giving birth almost at the peak of our real estate business. And she was my, right hand with our business. And she was a huge part of it. So she kind of had to take a back seat. And I was doing all her work myself and my own work, when we were the busiest we've ever been. So that was an extremely challenging time, but in a good way. Our business crushed it. We did very well, but I was definitely stressed to the gills. So, but then we got, after that, it was super busy for a while. And then we got a little break because the market slowed down, and it seems like now it's ramping back up again. So, everything happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of cycles that happen in the market, and it's again, how do we respond to it? And I think that's really interesting. I mean, right now in Pennsylvania, I think there's a lot of things that's interesting happening in the market in Pennsylvania. When you look at things like there's a change in property taxes, there's markets that are bolstering, there's markets that are waning. There's a lot of these challenges that happen, and what you're saying is take these challenges and turn them into opportunities.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, to that, saying it's, I love the one story with the Chinese farmer where, his horses run off, and he's, really, doesn't really seem very stoic about it. Everybody else is saying, "Oh, that's so terrible." And then he says, "Well, maybe." And then the next day, wild horses come, and they're like, "Oh, that's great." And he's like, "Well, maybe." And then his son gets on the horse, falls off, breaks his leg, and he's like, "Well, maybe." But, that whole saying of like, you really don't know, and things that happen, people are so quick to react that just wait, let the smoke clear. It may not be as bad as you think, or you could turn it into a positive for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And each one of those situations, you look at adversity. I think really what you're kind of talking about is when you look at the adversity, don't look at the adversity as adversity. It's kind of like, I guess it's like when Bruce Lee talked about the idea of fighting without fighting, right? It's like, are you going against the adversarial moment, or are you looking to win? No, I mean, think about a lot of the conversations that we get into. I mean, surely in real estate, you have this happen all the time where there's a tough conversation you have to have with somebody. And rather than proving whether you're right, you're trying to figure out how you can win. And in that sort of situation, if you look at it in your career, where's a moment where you looked for a win rather than than the battle itself or trying to prove to be right or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think not to make confidence a theme, but confidence in that is also so important. Where if you know the facts, if you know the numbers, if you know the data, if you know the statistics, and you're a true master of your craft, then you can kind of have a righteous demeanor about yourself when you talk about things. And I've never been, even at the poorest I was or the most successful I was, we've never been desperate for money or really greedy with it, or that wasn't the biggest factor of anything. It was always, hey, look, we want to do right, because when you bless, you get blessed. We firmly believe that, golden rule, kind of, treating others the way you'd want to be treated. And we never do a deal for somebody that we wouldn't do for ourselves. And I talk to everybody like they're my friend. Some people like it, some people don't. Most people that we've dealt with, especially, East Coast attitude with, Philadelphia, people appreciate that. They like it. And I think the best approach that I preached our agents and our associates to have with clients is say, hey, look, like at the end of the day, you hired us to do a job and we work for you. You're the boss. We'll do whatever you want us to do as long as it's legal and ethical. But here's our opinion, and it's based on these facts, our experience, obviously. These are the numbers. Here's the statistics. Here's the average days on market. Here's the comparable price. Here's the, percentage up or down from the listing price that price properties are selling for, and what's going on in the area. So here's all the facts, but we work for you, and we'll do as you instruct.
Yeah, and I think that goes down to having a discipline of focus on facts, that surround the decision. I mean, most fighters. I think Mike Tyson was the one he said like, do the things you hate like you love it. And when it comes to training, because there's going to be certain things that you need to do, especially as a real estate agent out there. Maybe you're not a numbers person, maybe you're a relationship person, but if you don't focus in on those numbers, you're not going to provide that best service to that relationship. And just like a fighter, a real estate agent needs to train every day. And how do you keep the agents excited about that discipline around training to become the most effective agent they can to service their market?
Sure. So I think a big piece of it is leading by example and being a good leader. So when they see you constantly having meetings and training events and hosting different new programs and software and different leaders in the industry, it really promotes that groundwork and that culture. And also success breeds that. A lot of our agents, like one of our realtors was number 15 in the world in Remax. So that was definitely a big accolade. So, I think creating that competition feeling, creating not too much competition, but a healthy amount, and leading by example and setting up different resources for education. And especially if there's anything new that happens in the industry, like the NAR lawsuit, all this AI technology coming into the business, keeping the agents abreast with that and informed and sending them emails and notifications and newsletters, that all breeds it. And I think definitely helps.
Absolutely. And I think, just like, every black belt used to be a white belt and they all started somewhere. And as they start somewhere, they get a framework of success. But a white belt can't become a black belt if he's not surrounded by other people who are going through the same journey. And when you look at the journey that people are taking in the brokerage right now, what do you think one of the number one thing that say that white belt's facing, that blue belt's facing, and that black belt's facing today as an agent?
Yeah, I think going back to something you said, Steve. So, not being afraid of trying new things and change is so important. Where I've noticed this in myself and everybody else, where, yeah, you might say you're not a numbers person, and it's because you don't have practice, experience, and tried it. Once you get into the numbers, after a while, you don't mind it so much, and you might even become a numbers person. Same thing with reading, same thing with exercise. I think, a lot of people, they have this mental block to just trying it the first time, and then once they try it, they slowly get better and better at it. They don't dread it as much. So I think having that mindset of being able to self teach and grind it out a little bit at first, even though it's hard, it's something new, in solitude, definitely helps.
Yeah, Brandon Dawson, he said it really well. He said, what you think is what you say is what you do becomes your legacy. And the idea that if you say that you're not a numbers person, you never will be, you've got to win that mental game and say that that is you. One of the things that I've been working on personally is changing my brand. I've always told people that I'm a numbers guy. And now I'm just telling people I'm good looking. So I figure hopefully I can win on that strategy and become the best looking guy on, what is it, Men's Health. Do you think I'm going to win on that one?
I think you could do that, and a good-looking guy that knows numbers, so even better.
So you're saying I can hit multiple categories and do well then?
Oh yeah.
In it. I'm perfect. That's good. Yeah. And I think, the personal brand is so important. And I think if you could start to say who you want to become is not necessarily with who you are today, which means you can't be the person you want to be by doing the things that you're doing right now. And I think it comes with that first winning the mindset inside and saying, I've got to change. And, like AI is coming down. There's no question that if anybody is not using AI right now in some form within their business, they're going to be left behind, full stop. And if people aren't focusing on winning on social media, there's a good chance that they could be left behind. What are some of the other toolkits that people need to focus on as a real estate agent or as an entrepreneur that you think that they really need to hone in on to win in 2025?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with AI and your media presence and social media and all. I mean, social media has obviously been around forever, but having your personal brand out there as much as possible is super important to be able to reach as many people as possible. And with AI, I'll give you a quick example of, for example, and I'm obviously you know about this stuff, but the biggest piece we're using it, not the biggest piece, there's a lot of pieces we're using it for. But one piece that makes a lot of sense is to chop up clips, obviously. And if you have to pay somebody to do that or give them the time to do that, it could be, tens of hours of work to do that. But so that's just one example, or even, something as silly as, if you have a website with your business, having the chat bot, if you had to pay somebody to sit there all day chat and, responding to something like that, that's not realistic. So I think especially for small business, leveraging the technology, AI, and, the power of the media is super important because you can cover a lot more ground versus a big company that can afford to hire infinite amount of employees. So I really think that is super important, and in today's world, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it goes down to whether I think people's relationship with technology has to change. When you look at technology of old, it would be something like QuickBooks or Excel. It's a tool that you're using. The way technology is today, it's a relationship that you have with a tool. And by that, I mean, when you're working with AI, you're not using AI. It's like you're managing AI. You've hired AI to do a task. And so your expectation needs to change because AI can do the job very effectively, or AI can hallucinate and completely go off script. And we've seen that happen with employees where employees maybe don't follow the same process that's been prescripted to them. Well, the same thing happens with AI. So the relationship, I think, to technology is different. Whereas before it was, this is a piece of clickety clack software that I'm using. Now I have a relationship with an AI identity, with an agent. And how does that transpire?
Yeah, for sure. So, for the people that are in the weeds on it, I definitely know it a little bit surface level, but I would say, you really have to either do your own research or find somebody that knows what they're doing, obviously, but you definitely need to train the algorithm and the bot so that it conducts business the way you want it to. And it depends on what business you're in. So we use a different protocol for our property management business versus our real estate, sales business. So for property management, for example, we have a chatbot for maintenance, and we really wanted that chatbot to be passionate. So if somebody says XYZ happened, it says, "Oh no, are you okay?" Like, very passionate and human and nurturing type, versus if it's a sales chatbot on our real estate website, it's more sales oriented. So, really mastering training your bot and algorithm to work as it should is super important. And that takes time and it gets better and better over time. But I think you nailed it where it's like, hey, look, you have problems with humans too, right? They're not perfect. And you have to kind of think of it as an employee or a tool or a human where you have to kind of, train it, modify it, and kind of keep it abreast with what's going on.
Yeah,
I'll give
absolutely.
you one more actually for AI that I really like. So for construction, what we like to do sometimes is we'll take an entire, 200-page zoning manual, upload it to the AI and say, hey, go through all this. And then we'll type in a property and say, what can I build here? And then it tells you without you having to go through every code, 200 pages, whatever. Hey, you can build this here, you can't build this here. You need a variance on this one, whatever. So that's another good use case for it in our business for sure.
That's a beautiful use case. I love that. And what you brought up actually is pretty interesting because the multifaceted approach you have to real estate is really interesting. Success in real estate can be found in many different ways. Obviously, as a realtor doing, sales, negotiating deals for the benefit of clients, as an investor, leveraging assets, as a broker owner, running a brokerage, and the last thing is property management, managing those properties. When you look at all those, I think that's very much like a Bruce Lee style approach to business because Bruce Lee didn't just focus on the idea of kung fu or karate. He really brought together everything under his whole umbrella of really the origin of MMA, which was Jeet Kune Do. And so if you're looking at that and becoming a master of having all those, how do you be successful at doing everything without doing nothing? Master of everything, master of none.
Yeah. So, for me, going back to Bruce Lee, being shapeless like water, formless, fitting into any container, that mindset really is important. And I think to survive long term in this industry, you have to have that mindset. And I'll give you a couple examples there. So, with the brokerage, it's I hate to say it, when I first started, commission splits were 50-50. The commission with a broker and an agent 50-50. The commission for what you would charge a client was closer to 6%. And as time went on, it's been getting less and less commission being charged to the clients, a worser commission split for the broker side. So it's kind of become, I hate to say it, a race to the bottom with that
Mhm.
business model. So if you're just solely relying on, selling or buying or selling, real estate for clients and getting commission, especially as a broker when your agents are getting most of the commission, you can't even turn the lights on, you're going to go out of business. So having that mindset is almost part of necessity too, where we have property management because when times are tough and things are slow, property management is doing good and the brokerage is maybe not doing great, or property management is doing great, the brokerage is doing better maybe. But also, with the brokerage side, having a mortgage business where, yeah, or a title company or a insurance company or a construction company where you can squeeze a little bit more out of each deal, but, also being able to give your clients better service and reduced rates and fees and all that kind of stuff. It's a win-win where you're making a little bit more off each deal. Even if the brokerage is a race to the bottom and you're not making money on the exact sale, the brokerage can almost become like a marketing arm for all these other businesses. So it's part of it is out of necessity, but also part of it logically makes sense where, especially if you're, because there's a lot of brokers and agents out there that they are just on the transactional side, sales side. They don't own a lot of real estate or develop their own real estate. So me owning a lot of real estate and developing my own real estate also led to, hey, look, what would help my real estate development or investing business? Having a brokerage or having a mortgage company or having a title company or property management or construction. All those things kind of go hand in hand with that ultimate goal of owning as much real estate as possible. That kind of goes hand in hand and feeds itself.
Yeah, the idea that, as an agent, when you walk out to service the need of one client, and if you have only one arrow in your quiver, and that's the only thing you can do, it almost becomes difficult to service the clients that you service because you're only looking for one outcome. And what you're saying is because you have, while it looks like so many things on the go, they have a single minded purpose of satisfying the need of the agents that you work with and the clients that you serve.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
right.
No, I love it, man. That's awesome. And last thing to kind of close things off, if you had to summarize successful mindset in one sentence, what would that be?
Ultimate confidence and righteousness, where you have the confidence and you can take risks and you believe in yourself to do what you need to do. When I started my brokerage, for example, I was before that I was a licensed agent, but I also had a full-time job as a civil engineering consultant because that's what I went to school for. To take that leap of faith of quitting my job and opening the brokerage, not having that income, that only you can do something like that if you believe in yourself and you're confident. So I think that's a huge part of it, not to make confidence the theme here, but there's a lot of aspects to it. Yeah.
Well, I think it is the theme, and I think confidence should be the theme because confidence comes from discipline. Confidence comes from the willpower that feeds discipline. Confidence comes from motivation, and confidence ultimately comes from success. Whether how small or how great, it's up to you, but confidence comes from that. So I think confidence is the theme of this podcast. And Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And guys, if you're looking for any real estate needs in the Pennsylvania area, take a look at Matin and take a look at his team at Remax. And dude, you've been crushing it, crushing the numbers. You've been doing some great development projects, and I can't wait to see where you're at the end of the year.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully we do this again.
Let's do it, my man. And guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.